Hello, Malvikka. You are an advocate
Hello.
and you're studying LLM. So, given this vastness of the subject of law, you still decided to choose the topic of fundamental rights. And we both came to the conclusion that it is very important. So, let us start with what are fundamental rights.
Right. Hi. First
Yeah,
of all, thanks for having me here.
no, it's my
Uh,
pleasure.
right. Thank you. So, fundamental rights are the very basic and the essential through which a person can get its liberty, dignity, equality. So, I will like to start with a very famous quote which has been given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, which says that Constitution is not a mere lawyer's document; it is a vehicle of life, and
Hmm.
its spirit is always the spirit of age. So, this means that a constitution gives its heart and soul in the form of fundamental rights. And it is part three is also called as the Magna Carta. So, we can, this is what the technical thing, but when we talk to a layman, it says that fundamental means something which is very basic,
Hmm.
essential, and core, which holds not just the equality liberty of an individual, but it also holds a significance for the same at the public at large. So the basic fragrance of the fundamental right is to promote the political democracy, the political freedom, and which can also be said that existence in a dignified manner of an individual, a everyday thing, a everyday right which a person gets and has to be given when a person lives in a society, to live in a dignified manner.
Hmm.
So this is what the main job of fundamental rights is.
Okay.
So moving further, we would like to also say that fundamental rights are enforceable in nature, and enforceable means, for example, if there is a breach by a person can directly go to the court, tell them that
Hmm.
there is a fundamental breach of right, and the court is enforceable. That is, that will have to be taken by the court, and you will get the solution or the solution to it. Whereas in the case of DPSP, the DPSPs are not enforceable.
We'll
That
come
is,
to
it is
that.
on the
Before that, I
right.
would like to ask you that what is the difference between rights given in the Constitution, especially the fundamental rights, and basic legal rights, like if you murder someone, you will be imprisoned, IPC and all that. So, what is the main
Mhm.
difference?
So fundamental rights are the main heart and soul.
Right.
That is, it is generally against the state, whereas the other legal rights and other
Hmm.
statutes are to the against the individuals also. For
Right.
example, if somebody murders somebody, that will not be against the state, but it will be against a particular individual. In case of
Hmm.
fundamental right, you can go to Supreme Court under Article 32, and you can go to High Court
High
under
Court.
Article 226,
Right.
right, to the High Court. So this is basically in general against the state. And one more thing I'd like to add, that
Hmm.
fundamental rights can be negative and positive. Negative in the state that the state shall not discriminate. Like there is a
Right.
not thing that is not doesn't have to be discriminated, like Article 21 in itself, which we'll be going to talk. But when it comes to positive right, it grants you like freedom of speech and expression.
Hmm.
So that is the another difference when it comes to other legal rights and context to fundamental rights.
So, like I'm curious, is Article 15 a negative right?
As far as I know, it's a negative right, right?
Right. So state cannot discriminate on the basis of employment. That is a negative, right? Right.
Right. Though
Right.
we have exceptions to it also, but
Hmm.
it's a negative right.
Okay. So for the layman, fundamental rights are basically the most essential rights, like right to live, right to speech, right to freedom. Right. Okay.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Moving on to directive principles. What are they?
Mhm. Directive principles, in short, can be said that these are what are given by, basically, it revolves around the socialistic structure. These are
Hmm.
the things which are given by the state for the benefit of its own citizens of the country. Example,
Right.
job, employment, and education and other things. And the major difference in DPSP is that these are not enforceable. So, for
Right.
example, if a state had promised me to give something which he is not giving it to me, I cannot just go into the court and say that this is the DPSP which the constitution is giving and you are not giving it to me. So we can say that this is on the discretion of the constitution or the
Hmm.
government that the DPSP has to be given or not. So it
So
is
what?
basically revolving around this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, just what is the use of writing something which is not enforceable?
No, it's not like that, that this is of no use. It is, of course, of a good use. But since I've mentioned that it is on the discretion of the state or
Right.
the implementing body. For example, we say that job has to be given, employment has to
Hmm.
be given, a betterment has to be done. So that is on the policy and the framework of the government, and they will deliver it at the time on which they have planned. You cannot go on your wish that I want it today. It's
Hmm.
not like that DPSP is not followed. It is always followed. It is a very essential part of it. But it is on the discretion and the timing of the authority which is giving it.
Right.
Whereas fundamental right is for me. I can go anytime when there is
Hmm.
a breach. So this
Hmm.
is the major reason that fundamental rights are enforceable and DPSPs are not enforceable.
Right. Okay. So fundamental rights are so huge, but Article 21 in itself is vast. So let us just talk on that. Right. So let us start
Right.
with what Article 21 basically means, what it says.
Right. So there are other articles also, but since we know that Article 21 in itself is an umbrella right. That is,
Hmm.
umbrella right simply means a right which gives you other various rights.
Right.
Article 20, there are various articles, other articles also, which has been interpreted, but Article 21 is the most interpreted article. The
Hmm.
reason behind this is with the time the society changes, and with the society changes, its needs changes and its causes changes. So therefore, we have seen from time and again that Article 21, which simply means that no one shall be deprived of his life and liberty except by the procedure established by the law. So let's start it. I don't want to be into a very technical thing because there are other
Hmm.
people, the non-legal background also, they would be listening.
Right.
So when it comes to Article 21, we can say that time and again it has been interpreted. For example, let's start from right to life to right to death. Do you see the
Yes.
variation? Also, we can see that there it can be around food, it can be around clothing, shelter. Everything is under Article 21. That is why we say that it is called as the bedrock of the Constitution. So we can say that Article 21 not just includes the basic, but it also includes freedom, dignity, and one of the major revolving subject is a free environment, a pollution-free environment,
Hmm.
in which we say. So let's start with a very before getting what exactly personal liberty and the procedure established by law. I'd like to build a small framework through which we can get what exactly Article 21 is. So let's see, when we stay inside a house, we don't get water supply one day, or we don't get electricity. Or, for example, I am from a BPL, below poverty line family, and one
Hmm.
day I've been refrained from getting food. So this is also a breach of my life and liberty.
Hmm.
I am I have a right to live my life in a dignified way with the basic features and basic essentials. And one day, if I'm denied with that, I can definitely go to the court and ask them for my fundamental right. This is a simple example when we are inside a house. As the time when we move outside a house, there is again a lot of things which can indulge into our Article 21. For example, as soon as we step out, we talk about privacy. For example, we go into restaurants, we go into cafes, we go into any other place. Every time we are asked for our personal details like our name, number, address, and we don't even have the discretion to deny it. So this is like a right to privacy. For example, our Aadhaar card, everywhere, all the government documents, Aadhaar card has been linked to.
Hmm.
Aadhaar also includes our biometric. So,
Hmm.
this way our privacy gets breached. You
Hmm.
don't know who is using your details, your personal details, in which way, and it can be misused also. Moving further, we have this data protection bill these days, and that this is the only reason to bring this bill is to safeguard our interest. For example, our mobiles, our TVs, our applications, everything uses. For example, you want to create an OTT platform. They'll be asking for your personal details, your email, your address, and other relevant details, including your banking. How do you know that you're providing your data to a third party or the other parties? They will keep your data safe. So this can be again a question, and that is why such acts and such bills are introduced so as to safeguard our own interest. Another is that we have environmental problems. Right to environment is again inferred from Article 21 only. For example, we are walking on the road, particularly during the times near to Diwali. We have so much of pollution. We are not able to breathe properly. We are not able to sustain ourselves properly. This is another example that this is a breach. We have to, when we get a dignified life, dignity is not just what we see, it is also what we feel.
Hmm.
And that not just the state, but our soul constitution is guaranteeing to us. Then we have other things also. For example, social media. We use social media on everyday basis.
Hmm.
You don't know who is taking the screenshot, who is sharing your data, who is doing what.
Hmm.
So, in such case, there is an extreme need of proper implementation and bringing up of the statutory provisions and laws so that this problem can be solved. Another example to it, and recently we have seen that we have criminal procedure identification bill. So it's basically for the prisoners. So it has replaced the Identification of Prisoners Acts 1920.
Hmm.
It is an old bill, old act, which has been brought replaced by the Criminal Procedure Identification Bill. The purpose of it is to collect the biometrics and the essentials so as to improve the criminal investigation process and
Right.
the other things so as to easen down the process for solving the case. So all this is a very simple example of right to life and liberty. We can also have right to life, we
Hmm.
have right to privacy, privacy of sexuality, we have manual scavenging, which we can definitely talk in detail after when we talk about what exactly Article 21 talks about in its legal sense.
Right.
So if you allow me, I would like to talk about some of the legal prospects of Article 21. So basically, right to life and liberty, as I've mentioned, initially, in the landmark case of Gopalan, A.K. Gopalan case, it was seen that the horizon or the interpretation was narrower. That simply means that it was only against the arbitrary executive actions
Right.
and not to the broader horizon. So basically, it was reverted in the landmark case of Menka Gandhi versus Union of India, where her passport was seized and she was not allowed to travel outside. So here it was seen that there has to be a executive and a legislative check as well. You just cannot reside, or you cannot just move around the executive actions. There has to be check on the fairness, reasonableness, and the justability of it. So that is why she very fairly quoted that a human life is not just has to be an animal existence. It has to have a dignified life, which clearly states that and has brought changes into the Article 21, where it increased the horizon from the narrower interpretation to a broader interpretation. And this was the landmark case because of which various inferred rights were brought into the picture, like right to live with dignity, right to water, right to fresh air, and all the interpretation only after this. So, if there is still a confusion of sorry, personal liberty, We can say that it has to be a clean environment, it has to be a proper dignified life where an individual is not having just an animal existence but have an equal existence like a reputable citizen of a country, and will have to have a dignified life. So this is what Article 21 talks about. So, one another essential element under Article 21 is that it revolves around the procedure established by law.
Right.
So, moving forward, there is a lot of confusion that what exactly is the procedure established by law and why do we follow the procedure established by law and not the due process of law.
What is the
So, we can
difference?
see. Right. So, coming to that, we have seen that courts should examine law not only from the point of view of the legislature, but also from the point of view of the fairness of law.
Right.
That is, so basically, in the procedure established by law, it is seen the legislative competence. So basically, procedure established by law means whatever the law has been made, that has to be followed when coming up to the justice. So here the court cannot question on the fairness and the reasonableness of the law. Whereas on the contrary to it, due process of law has a broader horizon. So it says that all what has been said in the procedure established law by law has to be done, but also at the same time, the fairness of law, which is the fragrance, has to be questioned.
Right.
Fairness of law has to be seen. Then only you can do justice to the article and accordingly justice to the people.
Hmm.
So that is the reason in the Maneka Gandhi case, we have seen that it is not just the executive action which has to be questioned, but also it has to be seen that the legislative competence and the fairness of law, which is revolving around the principles of natural justice.
Right.
So, after this case only, this was brought into a picture. The main aim of this was to bring a balance between the two so that the person who is going to the court is not refrained from the justice, but also there has to be a balance between the
Right.
procedure established by law and the due process of law.
Hmm.
And we can also say that the only reason of bringing this is to remove the arbitrariness.
Right.
So by getting the wider horizon, we can say that we are trying to remove the arbitrariness in the law.
Hmm.
So this is what I have seen in particular coming to Article 21. Then we have various interpretations also. So for example, we can see right to livelihood. So there was this case in the Bombay High Court where the people who are the pavement dwellers who stay on the pavement, they do not get the basic of their food, basic of right, electricity, education, and everything around. So it was saying that this is not a dignified life which they are getting. So
Hmm.
here the court interpreted that there is a right to livelihood and every individual has the right to basic amenities.
Hmm.
So that is why how right to livelihood was involved. Also, we were talking about privacy of sexuality. That is another inferred right for Article 21, where we have right to sexuality, but we also have the right to choice. For example, when the NAS Foundation case was scrapped off and Navteej Johar was brought, it was a thing where the sexuality, this article was given significance. So basically, on seeing this, we have seen that the people from the third gender have the right to choose whom they want to be. Though there are two clauses in which where the clause dealing with the animal has not been scrapped off, but the human choice has been scrapped off, and we have the right to choice. So there is a very recent example where the Nalsar Law College have made a third gender room and the third gender washrooms so that the people can in a dignified way on their daily basis use the washroom, use the area as per on their sexuality. Another way is that you must have seen there are various government websites which initially does not use to show the third gender while selecting male, female, third
Mm-hmm.
gender. So now we have various government sites where we can see that this provision is there, and it is very good to see that since you cannot, sexual orientation is not which is in your hand, it comes to you by nature. So Article 21 ensures that we have the right to choose that what and in which way we have to live. So that is why we have seen that privacy of sexuality and right to choose is another important interpretation. Another example we can see is manual scavenging, which can be come under right to live in a dignified manner. Manual scavenging, you know that people go inside the drainage and they clean and they're into this. In other countries, we have seen that there are various machines to do it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we do not have this a lot of machines or facilities in India. Whereas here it is seen that it is more cheaper to send a human being inside this thing and they can get it cleaned. Every you must be aware that because of this thing, there are a lot of health issues which gets associated with the person who is doing it. For example, they have the disease, they have various diseases, they have also skin infection, and then there is a continuous smell which retains. So it
Mm.
clearly shows that by this the dignity of a human being is affected on the daily basis, and how there is no enforcement on this, no even though we have legal provisions. I'm not saying that there are no legal provisions. Despite that, this is happening every day. People are dying, they are not getting the kind of the
Very.
machines and
Yeah.
everything they should have got.
Yeah.
So this is a thing which we are seeing on everyday basis, and it is very sad also to see how people are facing this problem still. Because once you do the work, they have to step back to their house. They are not able to stay comfortably as much as they could because the person who is doing is hesitant that the same problem cannot should not be transferred to the other family members, because you know that the skin disease are
Of
transferable
course.
also. It is communicable. So that is another thing which talks about, which comes under Article 21. Uh, since everybody know that we have passed through the time of COVID,
Mm.
so let's talk a little a bit about that also. How Article 21 is linked with COVID. So we can just talk about right to health.
Okay.
So, in the time of COVID, everybody have seen that how the doctors, the staff, and everybody has been working day and night so as to serve the patients. Also, the site to health have two aspects: one from the aspect of the doctors and the staff, and other in the aspect of the patients. So, let's first start with the doctors. So basically, the staff and the doctors have been working day and night so as to get better facilities and help the patient and to get the situation better. So there has been seen that despite all this, there was there was a lack of PPE kits, there were lack of medicine, there was lack of staff. Every doctor was drenching with sweat and other problem in wearing that heavy PPE kit. That is also, we can say that they are not able to live their life that they want, although they are professional and it is their job, but at the same time it is the responsibility of the state to provide them with amenities through which they are able to function in an easier and a comfortable manner. We understand that it is their duty, but at the same time it is their right also, since we know that duties, the rights come with duties. So it is also the duty of the state. I'm sorry that this goes the reverse way, but we can say that the doctors and the staff also expects a healthy environment, a healthier PP kit, so that they are not sacrificing their lifestyle.
Right.
I have seen doctors who have stayed in hospitals without some basic amenities for days so that their families doesn't get infected. So this is one side. The other side, we can see that on the sides of the patients, we have seen a lot of patients being dying of lack of oxygen. we had even after having so many facilities, right? We have many hospitals, everything,
mm,
but we didn't have the exact amount of oxygen we needed. A lot of
mm,
people were dying because since we were not ready for this amount of cases. But whatsoever the healthcare failure we can say, but it has been seen that at the end of the day, these are the people who were dying because of the lack of oxygen. And another thing that when on the later stages, oxygen data was not given by the state. When the authorities asked from the particular state that what was the statistical data about the lack of oxygen and other things, the states did not provide. Now even the issue of compensation is going on. So there basically nobody was ready to take the liability.
mm,
Compensation comes later. It can only be done when the liability gets solved. So therefore, we have seen that during the time of COVID, Article 21 has been challenged at various steps and at various level, and not just from one side, but from the other sides also. Though pandemics come with a wider scope where there is a lack of preparedness, but
mm.
despite that, despite the first and the second wave, we could have done better in the third wave, which we unfortunately failed to do that. So this is another aspect to right to life.
Uh,
So right,
uh, One curious question I like to ask is right to die with dignity.
right to die with dignity, definitely. So right to die with dignity. There is not. We shall call it right to die. So
Mm,
it has been always a debatable question. So there is this Aruna Shanbaug case and other landmark cases where we have
mm,
seen that right to die has been in question. So let's talk about first what euthanasia is. Then only we will
right,
be able to come
of
to this.
course.
So basically, there are two types of euthanasia. One is active euthanasia, and the other is passive euthanasia. Under active euthanasia, you use a lethal substance. For example, stops breathing.
Mm,
That is active. Whereas the passive euthanasia, you withhold the medical treatment. So in India, we have seen that the other passive euthanasia is legal. So, firstly, I'd like to say that in the Rathinam versus Union of India, it was seen that Article 21 also includes the right to die, and which was later challenged in the case of Gyan Kaur. So basically, it was said that right to life is a natural right, whereas right to die can be called as suicide.
right,
So we cannot just say that the constitution cannot just directly say that yes, you have the right to die. So that is why here the natural deaths comes into the question. So hence, in the case of Gyan Kaur versus Punjab, we have seen that passive euthanasia was allowed, and that too actually allowing a person to refrain the support is not as easy as we think. So there are various other criteria which have been seen, and right to die has been allowed under certain circumstances, and therefore we can say that. So how can we exactly link it with 21? 20 right to die means there is the personal liberty. If a person is in a vegetative state, one is not able to live. Technically, he's dead only. It's just that he's breathing. I mean, he's in a sense. I mean,
mm,
not in senses, but his heart is beating. I don't know the medical aspect. It's just that the person is in a vegetative state, but he does not understand what is happening. The only concept of living with the personal liberty, living it with the personal liberty is that the vegetative person is not able to live. So therefore, I don't.
yeah. You were saying?
Yeah, so where did it pause?
We were talking about vegetative state and lack of oxygen.
Right. So when a person is in a vegetative state, he does not know what is actually happening.
Hmm.
So, non-technically, we can say that the person is not living per se. So in that case, it should be the discretion of the person that since he's not able to do anything, he should also have the right to die. So by this, we can say that passive euthanasia was allowed, and people who are in an extreme condition, who are vegetative, in that case, the support should be taken off, and by this, they can be allowed to leave the world, and not by
How can a
externally injecting.
sorry, how can a
Yes,
person in a vegetative state give their consent?
absolutely. This question has been in picture since a long time, that how can a consent be given?
Uh,
So basically, the family members, if the doctors are satisfied that the person is in a vegetative state and there is almost no scope of recovery and the patient cannot do good, and then if the family is okay, then the doctors can go for it, because obviously the person cannot tell himself or by herself that I want to die. But basically we can just tell that the person is not in a condition to improve at all
hmm,
and has been in coma or in this state for years. So then we can say that yes, this should be allowed.
hmm.
So that is how we can just connect it with this.
Can this right also be extended to animals? Like if they are suffering a lot, no chance to recover, and a mercy killing would be better off.
I
What do you think?
think I think we can do that, since if this can be done to human beings, then that could be definitely done to animals also. I haven't heard much about it because
Hmm.
animals have always been mistreated or ill-treated a
Yeah.
lot of times in our country, unfortunately. The animal laws are also not very strong when it comes
Hmm.
to protection. You see the kind of cruelty. So, getting into the consent factor and everything is another story. But
Obviously.
yes,
Yeah.
I think this should be done because I've
Hmm.
seen yesterday only. I saw a dog. He was in an extremely bad condition. I was coming back. He didn't have two legs. He was just crawling on his two hands, the front. I don't know what do we call it, the first two hands or legs. So he was just on his two supports and he was moving. So in that case, it's always better to give. And I know that people do it unknowing. I mean, if they see that the dog is in a bad condition, nobody is going to track this into the courts because
Yeah.
who have
Obviously. Yeah.
time for animals? So, yes.
So, do you think that interpretation of 21 as a broader umbrella rights is a good thing?
Hmm.
Because if the legislature is not doing their work, so it gives a balance and system of checks to the legislature by the courts.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I'd like to say that Article 21 gives various inferred rights, as I have mentioned.
Hmm.
Some of this can be livelihood, privacy, shelter, health, education, speedy trials, handcuffing, and the delayed execution and emergency medical aid and right to women and whatnot.
Hmm.
There is an extremely long list to this. So, as I have mentioned before, also, this is one of the article which has been time and again with the needs of the society has been changed, interpreted in a lot of times and in a lot of senses, and that is why this is called as the heart and the soul of the Constitution. So,
Right.
as we know that Article 32, it is an article for fundamental right, which in itself is a fundamental right.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
whenever
Please
this
elaborate
happens,
on that.
right. So, since we know that Article 32, we can go to the Supreme Court in the case of breach of fundamental rights, and this is in general against the state. So,
Okay.
since the court of law is this is enforceable in the court of law, and we have to also mention that in general it is against this breach when it comes to the part of the state. So we can say that this is, we can this is amendable, but the basic structure cannot be changed. as
Right.
we have seen.
Right. Right.
So we can interpret it in various ways as
Yeah.
for the time and the need. As for example, we have talked about in right to die and all that.
Hmm.
So that is why I think Article 32 is considered as the essence of the Constitution.
Hmm.
And whenever a person feels that I am being denied of a fundamental right, one can walk into the court so
Hmm.
as to get it enforced. So with this, he can hold the principles of equality, dignity, liberty of an individual, and also to the public at large. And we can say that existence is in a has to be in a dignified manner and not just an animal existence. And it is very extreme. This is an extremely essential element for the overall development of a personality and an individual.
Hmm.
It's not just this. An overall thing a person can only be developed when he is getting the basic communities and the other facilities and the dignities, so that one can overall development. So that is
Yeah.
why it is considered as this is considered as an extremely essential article.
Yeah. So, like,
So
yeah, you
please.
said that if the rights are violated, fundamental rights under 32 or 226 in case of High Court, a person can move the Supreme Court or the High Court. So,
Right.
I think since it is so essential, can we talk briefly about public interest litigation as well? What happens if you
Yes,
cannot go to court? Yeah.
definitely you can file. You can go to the court. Why can you
Yeah.
not go to the court under 32? You
No,
can
no, no.
definitely.
No.
Mhm.
I'm saying that if I am a poor person or unable to have the practical resources or knowledge,
Right.
that my rights are
Mhm.
violated, because I don't think that the state has the duty to, you know, if the rights are violated, they will fight for your rights in case of fundamental rights, or the police will come.
Absolutely.
You have to go yourself, right? So that
Absolutely.
is why the concept of PIL was introduced.
PIL is
So what
right.
what basically happens in that?
So PIL is seen that if a person usually is in a condition that one cannot by oneself go to the court, or does not have is not from an economically sound background, or does not think have the other facilities aid in education, then if a person thinks that one can take a stand for the other person, a public interest litigation is filed. It can
Hmm.
be against a group of people. For example, PILs have been widely seen in the case of right to environment.
Hmm.
So in that case, one can file a PIL, and we can further go into the court and we can get the solution via PIL. PIL is a very extremely effective tool when we have to do it for the public at large. For
Right.
example, the landmark case of NC Mehta, and there are so many
Yes.
other environmental cases, particularly the environmental social movements and all this.
Hmm. Right.
So yeah. So
So
I
it
have
is
some.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, please.
it is actually a good method for activists to play their part in formation of laws.
Hmm.
Yes, you
Right.
were saying. So sorry.
No, that's okay. So I was saying that I have some more examples to import rights under
Please go ahead.
Article 20. Right. So, for example, I have talked about the privacy of sexuality, the criminal
Hmm.
procedure bill. We have some other cases which have been seen in the very recent times.
Hmm.
So, for example, we have seen the hijab rule, which has
Hmm.
been
Hmm.
a notice has been filed in the a notice has been given by the
Hmm.
government of Karnataka, where that only the school attire has to be worn, and the hijab was refrained, being it not being the part of the school attire. So can we not say that this is also a right to live with one's own choices and one's own human dignity?
Hmm.
Although we can link this with other articles also, that freedom of our own freedom, and then the religious choices, everything is allowed, but then everything, as I've mentioned before, is it comes as an umbrella term. So
Yeah.
it is we can definitely come with this, that wearing a hijab is one's own choice. Therefore, Article 21, we can go to the court and say that we have the right to choice of what we wear, and uh, we can just challenge this as a fundamental right under Article 21.
Hmm.
Then we have the let's one more example is the right of the migrant workers.
Hmm.
For example, you have seen that a lot of migrant workers have been going walking all the ways to their villages, back to their towns because of the thing,
Hmm.
because of the COVID. So there was not a lot of efforts was not made by the government so as to get the better condition. You know, a lot of people died midway. They were not
Hmm.
getting food. They just started walking for kilometers and kilometers. So everything, this is also like against, this can be challenged as right to shelter, right to food, right to life, right? And their children were suffering. Where was the education? Right to education. Article 21A itself talks about right to education.
Hmm.
Then how can a parent who's in such an economically unsound condition where they do not have the basic amenities, how can they provide the education to their children in such conditions? So a lot of aspects could be seen when it comes to the migrant worker crisis. They were like extremely, they were ill treated, they were dying, and the situation was extremely pathetic. So we can say that this is another scene where Article 21 has been breached. And there's one more very recent example of Bombay High Court, where there was a right to live in the safe buildings. So people, am I audible?
Yeah, yeah, you are audible.
Yeah. So the people who are living in the building which have crossed the time span of the particular number of years, and these building can collapse, and they are not
Hmm.
in a right structural position, and and there has been various examples in past also that the buildings collapsed, people died. At the end of the day, the authorities will come compensate the people, but at the end of the day they have died. So it is equally the right to live in the safe buildings, the right to live properly. It is
Hmm.
another form inferred right which comes under Article 21. Therefore, the state should do as much as to provide a dignified life to the people. Though I'm not saying that there are not exceptions. Of course, there are exceptions. For example, when there are emergencies, there are exceptions. That
Hmm.
those are exceptional times. But in a casual form of time and in a usual world, it is the responsibility of the state to provide a person with a dignified life, with a healthy atmosphere, with an environment free of pollution, with all the basic amenities. And there has to be medical aid, legal aid. Nobody focuses a lot on legal aid. Coming to it, we do have legal aid cells now, but a lot of people, they do not know about what their legal rights are. They get arrested, they are misused by a little financially well-to-do people, since the people from the lower economic stratas do not know much about their legal rights. So in this case, right to legal aid is it is an extremely essential thing, so that basic legal education is given to the people. For example, what has to be done if they are arrested, what has to be, what is their legal right. They can make a call, they can hire a lawyer, they also have the right to speak. Everything comes under it. So we therefore we have legal aid cells also, where we provide legal education to the people who are
Hmm.
not economically well to sound. So legal aid is another very extremely essential part of Article 21. Then we have a right to free trials, that
Right.
there does not have to be an external pressure and all this. So the free trials holds an extremely important part. Then we have right of women to be treated with decency and dignity. Sexual harassment and other offenses have been seen extremely, in this country, that it is very commonly seen. So there is a landmark case of Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan, which talks about right against sexual harassment. So it is a very famous quote given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar again, that I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress its women has got with time.
Beautiful.
So we have
Hmm.
seen that in this case, where the public and the private sector must have the complaint mechanisms, and proper steps should be taken and the workplaces, and there has to be complaint committees, so that if there is any such case, this matter just not goes here and there, and there has to be a proper mechanism for the redressal also. Then we have as I've mentioned, right to clean environment also, where we have seen the landmark case of MC Mehta that a lot of people must be knowing it. And there was another example taken by the state government of Delhi where odd and even was got into the picture. So all these, this would go on and on, since Article 21 can be word interpreted in a lot of aspects. So if you think that there is in more particular that I should cover, please let me know. And
No. There are a lot of actually. I would like to ask you, like, with all these rights, do some restrictions also come? So, for example, in right to privacy, so for example, Facebook would require your basic information so that you can sign up a profile. So,
right.
do they fall under this restriction? Are there restrictions to fundamental rights?
Definitely, there are restrictions to fundamental rights. Article 19, the restrictions have been imposed by the state. But when it comes to the private entities, there are no such, there are no such restrictions. For example, if the Facebook is asking for your details, Facebook will simply tell you that either you have to do it or don't use the app. So you either like it or you don't like it, you will have to fill it up. So that is why there's a need for statutory provisions. For example, this Data Protection Act. Uh, there is an extreme need for such laws because these people get out of the ambit of fundamental rights and they easily reframe your rights. So therefore, we need more, uh, framed statutory provisions so as to improve the situation. So that is why I think it is important to, because we have this Aadhaar case also, where all the documents are interconnected. For example, Aadhaar is connected with PAN and other legal documents also. So we need stringent laws to do the betterment of the people, and because they use our biometrics, they use a signature, they use a name, address, and all the other relevant information. So therefore, there's a need to just regulate them in a appropriate way, and let's see what happens with time.
Right. We have done such an extensive research on the topic that I did not even need to ask anything.
I'm glad.
It was a beautiful discussion that I had with you. Let me just stop the recording here.
Yeah, thank